What if everything you believed about the divine was just the beginning of a far greater truth? What if the miracles of Jesus weren't supernatural violations of natural law, but demonstrations of a cosmic science that the Church has hidden from humanity for over 1,000 years? Today, I'm going to share with you a story that will give you chills, a revelation so profound that it challenges everything we think we know about faith, divinity, and our place in the universe. This is the account of Brother Matthias, a Benedictine monk whose encounter with a mysterious being in the year 1147 forever changed not just his understanding of God, but the very nature of reality itself. Before we begin this journey into the unknown, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Stories like this, hidden truths that have been buried for centuries, are exactly why we exist. Don't let the algorithm hide these revelations from you. The Kingdom of Francia, 1147 AD. The Second Crusade has just been declared, and across Christendom, the faithful are stirring with religious fervor. But in the remote monastery of St. Aldrich, nestled deep within the Vosges Mountains, one monk is about to discover that the greatest crusade isn't fought with sword and shield, but with the courage to question everything you've ever believed. Brother Matthias had dedicated his life to the pursuit of divine truth. At 32 years old, he had spent nearly half his life within the stone walls of St. Aldrich's monastery, copying sacred texts, tending to the sick, and seeking God through prayer and contemplation. Unlike many of his brothers who had joined the order to escape the harsh realities of medieval life, Matthias had come seeking something more, a direct connection to the divine that seemed to elude him no matter how fervently he prayed. Born the son of a minor nobleman, Matthias had witnessed enough of the world's cruelty to question how a benevolent God could permit such suffering. The death of his younger sister from plague when he was barely 16 had shattered his childhood faith, replacing it with a desperate hunger for real answers. He had hoped that monastic life would provide them, but after 15 years of ritual and routine, he felt further from God than ever.
His fellow monks respected him for his intelligence and dedication, but they also whispered about his tendency to ask uncomfortable questions during theological discussions. Why did Jesus speak in parables if divine truth was meant to be clear? How could an all-loving God condemn souls to eternal damnation? If the Church truly held divine authority, why did its representatives so often act with such worldly ambition and cruelty? Brother Matthias served as the monastery's herbalist and keeper of the scriptorium, roles that suited his contemplative nature and sharp mind. He spent his days among ancient texts and healing plants, seeking patterns and connections that might reveal deeper truths about the divine plan. It was during one of his frequent night vigils in the monastery's herb garden that his life changed forever. The date was September 21st, 1147, the autumnal equinox, though Matthias paid little attention to such pagan markers of time. He had been unable to sleep, plagued by the same spiritual emptiness that had haunted him for months. The Abbey Church felt cold and lifeless to him lately, its prayers echoing hollowly off stone walls. So he had come to the garden, hoping that communion with God's creation might rekindle the flame of faith that seemed to be slowly dying within him. The night was unusually clear, with a canopy of stars more brilliant than any he could remember. As he knelt among the rows of medicinal herbs, trying to quiet his restless mind, a light appeared in the eastern sky. At first, just another star, but growing brighter and larger with each passing moment. Matthias watched in growing amazement as the light descended toward the earth, not like a falling star that streaks and burns out, but like a controlled descent. It was heading directly toward the monastery grounds, toward the forest that bordered the garden where he knelt. The light disappeared beyond the tree line with no sound, no crash, no explosion, just a gentle pulse of radiance that illuminated the forest briefly before fading to darkness. For several minutes, Matthias remained frozen in place, his rational mind warring with what he had witnessed. Falling stars were omens, he knew from the old stories, but they burned out in the heavens. They didn't land softly in forests like descending angels. His heart pounding with a mixture of fear and inexplicable excitement, Brother Matthias made the decision that would alter the course of his life forever. Grabbing a lantern from the garden shed, he made his way toward the forest, following an inner compulsion he couldn't name or resist. The woodland path was familiar to him. He often came here to gather wild herbs and mushrooms for his medicines. But tonight, the forest felt different, charged with an energy that made his skin tingle and his breath catch. About half a mile from the monastery walls, he saw it, a soft, pulsing glow emanating from a clearing ahead. Brother Matthias approached the clearing with trembling steps, his lantern casting dancing shadows through the trees. What he found there defied every category of his medieval worldview. In the center of the clearing lay what appeared to be a vessel of some kind, not made of wood or metal, but of a material that seemed to shift and shimmer like crystallized moonlight. It was roughly oval in shape, about the size of a small chapel, and portions of its surface had been damaged, revealing an interior that glowed with a soft, pearl-like radiance. But it was not the vessel that stopped Matthias in his tracks. It was the being that sat beside it. The creature was unlike anything from the bestiary texts he had studied. It stood perhaps 6 feet tall when upright, but was currently slumped against a tree, clearly injured. Its form was humanoid, but elongated, with limbs that seemed too delicate for earthly existence. Its skin appeared to be translucent, revealing a network of luminous pathways beneath the surface that pulsed gently, like a second circulatory system made of light itself. Most striking of all were its eyes, large, dark, and filled with an intelligence and compassion that was immediately recognizable as neither animal nor demonic. This was a thinking, feeling being, and it was suffering. Brother Matthias's first instinct was to flee. Every sermon he had ever heard about demons and fallen angels echoed in his mind. But as he took a step backward, his foot snapped a dry branch, and the being's head turned toward him. In that moment, their eyes met, and Brother Matthias felt something he had been seeking his entire monastic life, an unmistakable sense of the sacred. Peace, Brother Matthias. The words formed in his mind, not heard, but understood, spoken in a voice that carried the warmth of summer sunshine and the depth of ancient wisdom. The being had not moved its mouth. Indeed, Matthias wasn't certain it possessed one in the conventional sense. You know my name?" Matthias thought back, somehow understanding that this mental communion was possible. "I know the names of all who truly seek the light. You have called to the source for so long, your prayers reaching far beyond the small heaven your teachers have described. Tonight, the source has answered." Matthias felt his knees go weak. Are you an angel?"
The being's response carried something that might have been gentle amusement. "I am what your scriptures would call a messenger, though I come from farther than your prophets imagined possible. I am called Lumiel in your tongue, though names are but shadows of true identity." "Are you dying?" Matthias asked, noticing the dim flickering of the light patterns beneath the being's skin. "My vessel was damaged in the descent through your atmospheric layers. The crystalline matrices that sustain my physical form in this dimension are failing. Without aid, this body will indeed perish, though my essence would return to the light from whence it came." Every instinct born of 32 years of Christian teaching screamed at Matthias to flee, to report this encounter to his abbot, to pray for protection against demonic deception. But another voice, deeper and more certain than any he had ever heard, whispered that this was the answer to every prayer he had ever offered in desperation. What do you need?" he heard himself ask. "Sanctuary. Time for my vessel's self-repair systems to function. Perhaps 7 of your day cycles, no more. In return, I offer you something your soul has long yearned for." "Which is?" "Truth, Brother Matthias. The truth about the one you call Jesus. The truth about the realm you call heaven. The truth about the divine potential that sleeps in every human soul, waiting to awaken." Matthias felt a chill run through him that had nothing to do with the cool night air. "The Church teaches that such knowledge is revealed through Scripture and tradition, that questioning these mysteries is dangerous." "The Church teaches control, not truth. The one you worship as the Christ came to awaken humanity to its divine heritage, not to create institutions of earthly power. His message was corrupted within decades of his departure, transformed into a tool for those who feared the very liberation he offered." That's blasphemy." "Is seeking truth blasphemy, Matthias? Is questioning why your prayers feel hollow blasphemy? Is wondering why the God of love permits such suffering blasphemy? Or is blasphemy the perversion of divine truth into human dogma?" The being's words struck at the heart of every doubt that had plagued Matthias for years. He found himself stepping closer, his fear transforming into desperate hope.
I offer you no easy answers, no comfortable lies. I offer only truth. Truth that will challenge everything you believe. Truth that will demand you choose between the security of ignorance and the terrible freedom of understanding. What will you choose, seeker of light?
Brother Matthias looked at the damaged vessel, at the wounded being, at the crossroads that would define the rest of his life. He thought of his empty prayers, his hollow rituals, his growing certainty that there had to be more to divine reality than what he had been taught. "I will help you," he said aloud, his voice surprisingly steady. "But if what you share with me proves to be deception, if you are indeed the tempter our scriptures warn against, then may the light itself judge me, and may truth be revealed in its perfect time. But prepare yourself, Matthias. The knowledge I carry will shake the foundations of everything you have built your identity upon. Are you truly ready to have your faith tested so severely?" Looking back later, Brother Matthias would realize that this was the moment his old life ended and his real spiritual journey began. "I am ready," he whispered into the starlit clearing, and meant it with every fiber of his being. Over the next 3 days, Brother Matthias managed to secretly relocate Lumiel to an abandoned storage chamber beneath the monastery's infirmary. The space had once housed wine barrels, but had been sealed off years ago after damage from flooding. It was accessible through a hidden entrance behind the herb drying racks, and Matthias convinced his fellow brothers that he was conducting a special retreat focused on intensive prayer and fasting. The being's presence transformed the musty underground chamber into something otherworldly. The walls themselves seemed to glow with a soft radiance that emanated from Lumiel's healing form. Hour by hour, the light patterns beneath the being's translucent skin grew stronger and more complex, like watching a constellation being reborn. But it was not the physical transformation that captivated Matthias. It was the revelation of truths that shattered every assumption he had ever held about the nature of divine reality. "Tell me about your Jesus," Lumiel's mental voice whispered on the second day as Matthias sat in meditation beside the being's resting form. "He is the Son of God," Matthias replied automatically. "Born of a virgin, he lived without sin, performed miracles, died for our salvation, and rose from the dead to sit at the right hand of the Father."
And what do you make of his words, "Greater works than these shall you do"? What did he mean when he said, "The kingdom of heaven is within you"? Why did he call his followers to be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect? Matthias paused, realizing he had never truly considered these passages deeply. The Church teaches that these were metaphors, or promises for the afterlife, or I'm not certain. The one you call Jesus was not unique in his divine nature, Matthias. He was unique in his full awakening to the divine nature that exists within all conscious beings. What you call his miracles were not supernatural violations of cosmic law, but demonstrations of what becomes possible when a consciousness fully aligns with the creative force you call God. But the Church teaches that Jesus was God incarnate, different from us in essence. The Church teaches separation where Jesus taught unity. It teaches unworthiness where he taught divine heritage. It teaches the need for intermediaries where he taught direct communion with the Source. Lumiel's form pulsed gently with increased light as the being's strength returned. In my travels across the cosmos, I have encountered countless worlds where beings have achieved what your species calls godhood. They heal with intention, create with focused thought, transcend physical limitations through expanded consciousness. This is not magic, Matthias. This is the natural expression of sufficiently evolved awareness. Are you saying that Jesus was like you, a being from another world? Jesus was fully human and fully divine, as are you. The difference was not in his nature, but in his remembrance of that nature. He came to show humanity its own reflection in the cosmic mirror. But his message was corrupted by those who found it more profitable to teach dependence than empowerment. Matthias felt a familiar crisis of faith beginning to stir within him. But if that's true, then everything I've believed, everything the Church teaches, truth is not diminished by the institutions built upon its distortion. The divine love that Jesus embodied is real. The cosmic consciousness he called Father is real. The unity he preached between all living beings is real. But the structures of power and control erected in his name have obscured these truths behind veils of fear, guilt, and manufactured separation. Over the following hours, Lumiel revealed knowledge that expanded Matthias's understanding of reality in ways that made his head spin. The being spoke of consciousness as a fundamental force of the universe, as real and powerful as gravity or electromagnetism, but operating on dimensions that earthbound humans had forgotten how to perceive.
What you call prayer is actually a form of consciousness technology, a method of aligning your individual awareness with the infinite creative intelligence that permeates all existence. When Jesus healed the sick, he was not performing supernatural magic. He was demonstrating how focused intention, combined with absolute compassion and divine love, can restructure physical reality at the quantum level. Quantum level? Matthias repeated, struggling with concepts for which medieval language had no words. The realm where thought becomes form, where intention shapes matter, where the observer and the observed dance together in the eternal act of creation. Your physicists will discover these principles in centuries to come, but the spiritually awakened have always known them through direct experience. Lumiel went on to explain that what humans called miracles were simply the natural result of consciousness operating from its fully awakened state. Healing occurred when someone's awareness vibrated at the frequency of perfect wholeness. Manifestation occurred when desire aligned completely with divine will. Even what Christians called resurrection was possible when consciousness remembered its true nature as eternal and beyond physical limitation. The tragedy of your world, Matthias, is that humans are not fallen or sinful by nature. The tragedy is that you have forgotten your divine heritage. You pray to a God out there, when the kingdom of heaven pulses within your very cells. You seek salvation from an external Savior, when you possess the same creative power that Jesus demonstrated. But why? Why would the Church hide such knowledge? Power, control, and fear. A population that remembers its divine nature cannot be controlled by threats of eternal damnation. People who can heal themselves and commune directly with the source have no need for priestly intermediaries.
Humans who understand their unity with all creation cannot be convinced to wage holy wars against their own spiritual family. The being's mental voice carried a deep sadness as it continued. Within 3 centuries of Jesus' departure from earth, his simple message of love and awakening had been transformed into an empire of spiritual colonization. The sacred feminine was demonized, the mystical traditions were suppressed, and the direct experience of divine communion was replaced by rigid doctrines that separated humanity from its own divine nature. Matthias found tears streaming down his face as the full weight of these revelations settled into his awareness. Everything he had dedicated his life to, the rituals, the hierarchy, the very foundations of his identity as a monk, suddenly seemed elaborate constructions designed to keep him from the very truth he had been seeking.
Do not despair, beloved seeker. Truth cannot be destroyed, only temporarily obscured. In every generation, some souls remember. In every age, the light finds a way to shine through the cracks of institutional control. You are not the first to receive this knowledge, and you will not be the last. But what am I supposed to do with this? How can I continue to serve in a monastery that teaches the opposite of what you're revealing? You serve truth, not institutions. You follow the Christ consciousness, not the church built in its name. And your true service is yet to begin. As the 3rd day dawned, Matthias realized that his understanding of heaven itself had been fundamentally transformed. According to Lumiel, heaven was not a distant realm reserved for the afterlife, but a dimension of consciousness available in every moment to those who raised their vibration high enough to perceive it. Your mystics have always known this truth, though they often lacked the language to express it clearly. Heaven is not a place you go to when you die. It is a state of being you can access right now through the expansion of your awareness beyond the limitations of ego and separation. Then what happens when we die? Consciousness is eternal, Matthias. What you call death is simply the release of awareness from its temporary identification with a particular physical form. Those vibrating at the frequency of love and unity naturally transition to dimensions of greater light and freedom. Those still trapped in patterns of fear, hatred, and separation experience dimensions that reflect these lower vibrations, not as punishment, but as continued opportunities for growth and eventual awakening. The revelation that rocked Matthias most deeply was Lumiel's explanation of Jesus' true teachings about the nature of divinity itself. The one you worship did not come to establish a new religion, but to remind humanity of the cosmic religion that has always existed, the recognition that all consciousness is one, that love is the fundamental force of creation, and that every sentient being has the potential to express the same divine qualities that he demonstrated. Then why did he allow himself to be killed? He chose to demonstrate that consciousness is stronger than death, that love is more powerful than fear, and that truth will always ultimately triumph over the forces that would suppress it. His resurrection was not a unique miracle, but a preview of the destiny that awaits all consciousness as it evolves toward complete remembrance of its divine nature.
By the end of the 3rd day, Brother Matthias felt as though he was living in an entirely different universe than the one he had inhabited just 72 hours earlier. Every prayer, every ritual, every theological discussion of his monastic life was now illuminated by a radically different understanding of what it meant to be human and what it meant to commune with the divine. But with this expanded awareness came a crisis that threatened to tear his soul apart. On the fourth night of Lumel's hidden presence in the monastery, Brother Matthias experienced what mystics throughout history would recognize as the dark night of the soul, that terrible period when old certainties have crumbled, but new understanding has not yet solidified into unshakable faith. Unable to sleep, he paced the cold stone corridors of St. Aldrich's like a man haunted. Every familiar sight, the crucifix in the chapel, the illuminated manuscripts in the scriptorium, the cells where his brother monks slept peacefully in their unchanged faith, seemed to mock him with questions that had no comfortable answers. What if Lumel was exactly what the Church warned against? A demon of deception, skilled beyond human comprehension in the art of spiritual seduction? What if these beautiful, liberating truths were actually the most sophisticated lies ever crafted, designed to lead souls away from their only true salvation? Matthias found himself in the monastery chapel at 3 a.m, prostrating himself before the altar in an agony of doubt that felt like physical pain. "Oh God," he whispered desperately to the carved wooden Christ that hung above the altar, "if this being is your enemy, if these revelations are falsehoods meant to damn my soul, please give me a sign. Please show me the truth before I am led so far astray that I can never find my way back to you." The silence that greeted his plea felt more oppressive than any answer. The stone saints that lined the chapel walls seemed to stare down at him with expressions of cold judgment, as if they already knew he had crossed a line from which there could be no return. His theological training marshaled every argument against what he had experienced. Angels, when they appeared in Scripture, inspired awe, but not doubt about fundamental church doctrine. They came to announce births, deliver specific messages, or provide comfort. They did not come to undermine the very foundations of revealed truth.
If Jesus was not uniquely divine, if his death and resurrection were not the singular atonement for human sin, if salvation was not dependent on church sacraments and belief in specific doctrines, then what was the point of Christianity itself? What was the point of monastic life? What had Matthias devoted his entire adult life to? Even more terrifying was the thought of what would happen if his encounter was discovered. The Inquisition was gaining power throughout Christendom, and the Church's response to heresy was becoming increasingly brutal. Bernard of Clairvaux himself had recently preached that it was better to kill heretics than to allow their false teachings to corrupt the faithful. If Matthias was harboring a demon and spreading its lies, he would not simply face execution, he would face torture designed to save his soul through the destruction of his body. The rational part of his mind cataloged every detail that should have warned him against trusting Lumio. Its refusal to affirm traditional church teachings, its criticism of papal authority, its claim that direct divine communion was possible without priestly mediation, its suggestion that humans possessed inherent divine nature. These were classic markers of the demonic deceptions that every theologian warned against. Yet even as his trained intellect mounted its defense of orthodoxy, Matthias could not shake the memory of what he had felt in Lumiel's presence. The peace that had settled over his soul during their conversations was unlike anything he had experienced in 15 years of Christian practice. The love that radiated from the being was so pure and unconditional that it made human affection seem like a pale shadow. And the truths that had been revealed resonated with something deep within him that felt more ancient and authentic than any doctrine he had ever memorized. As dawn approached, Brother Matthias realized he was facing the most consequential decision of his life. He could report Lumiel's presence to the abbot, confess his temptation, submit to whatever penance was required, and return to the safety of unquestioning faith. Or he could continue down a path that might lead to either the greatest spiritual awakening possible or the complete damnation of his immortal soul. The two choices seemed mutually exclusive. There was no middle ground between accepting church authority and embracing the radical teachings he had received. One way led to the security of institutional approval, but the death of his spiritual curiosity. The other led to unknown territory where he would have to navigate by inner guidance alone. "You are struggling, beloved friend." Lumiel's voice reached him even through the stone walls that separated the chapel from the hidden chamber. Matthias was startled to realize that their connection had grown strong enough for communication across such distance. "Temptation is not a wicked thing, nor is it a weakness that must be overcome. It is simply the invitation to consider new possibilities, to explore the unknown, and to consider whether your current beliefs still serve your soul. The choice is always yours, beloved friend. All that I can offer is the opportunity to experience more love, more joy, more understanding, more freedom."
I can feel the torment in your consciousness. This is the necessary passage that all seekers must traverse when truth begins to dissolve the comfortable lies that have structured their reality. How do I know? Matthias thought back desperately. How do I know that you are not the deceiver? That these feelings of peace and love are not exactly the trap that demons would set for someone like me? You know by the fruits, as your Jesus taught. Does what I have shared with you increase your capacity for love, compassion, and service? Does it make you more judgmental and fearful, or more understanding and peaceful? Does it separate you from your fellow beings, or help you recognize the divine spark within all creation? Matthias considered this carefully. Since Lumiel's arrival, he had found himself feeling more compassion for his fellow monks, not less. He had caught himself being more patient with the novices who struggled with their studies, more understanding of the brothers whose faith seemed simpler and more certain than his own. The anger and spiritual emptiness that had plagued him for months had been replaced by a sense of purpose and connection that felt unquestionably healthy. But still the doubt persisted. Perhaps this too was part of the deception. "There is one way to know with absolute certainty," Lumiel continued. "Ask for a demonstration of divine truth that no force of darkness could provide. Ask for proof that what I carry comes from the same source that your Jesus represented. What kind of proof? That is for you to determine.
What would convince your heart beyond all possible doubt that the love and wisdom I embody comes from the light you have devoted your life to seeking? Brother Matthias spent the remainder of the night in prayer, not the memorized prayers of the monastic hours, but desperate petitions from the depths of his soul. If God was real, if divine love truly existed, if there was any truth to be found in this bewildering situation, he needed a sign that would silence every doubt and give him the courage to step fully into whatever destiny awaited him. As the morning bells called his brothers to lauds, Matthias finally knew what he needed to ask for. When Brother Matthias descended to the hidden chamber that evening, Lumiel's form had become almost luminous with restored vitality. The being's translucent skin now pulsed with patterns of light so complex and beautiful that they seemed to contain entire galaxies of meaning. "You have decided what proof you require," Lumiel observed before Matthias had even spoken.
"Yes," Matthias replied, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "There is something, someone, that only divine power could reach." He told Lumiel about his sister, Marguerite, who had died of plague when she was barely 14 years old. Her death had not only shattered his childhood faith, but had left him with a wound that never truly healed. For 18 years he had prayed for some sign that her soul had found peace, some indication that her brief, innocent life had not been meaningless suffering followed by extinction. If you truly serve the same light that Jesus embodied, if what you've taught me about consciousness surviving death is real, then show me Marguerite. Let me know that she exists somewhere in the vast creation you've described, and I will never doubt again. Beloved seeker, what you ask requires more than demonstration. It requires participation. I can open the doorway between dimensions, but your consciousness must be prepared to step through it. Are you willing to temporarily release your attachment to this physical reality and allow your awareness to expand beyond its current limitations? The question terrified and exhilarated Matthias in equal measure. What will happen to me? Nothing will happen to your essential being, but you will temporarily experience yourself as consciousness rather than body, as spirit rather than flesh. You will see through the eyes of your true nature rather than through the filters of physical perception. Matthias nodded his consent, and Lumiel gestured for him to sit in meditation posture directly across from the being's resting form. Close your eyes and breathe deeply. Feel your heart beating, your blood flowing, your life force pulsing through every cell. Now imagine that this life force is not confined to your physical body, but extends infinitely in all directions, connecting you to every other conscious being in existence. As Matthias followed these instructions, he began to feel a strange loosening of his sense of physical boundaries. It was as though his consciousness was gently expanding beyond the confines of his body, like water being released from a container. Do not fear this expansion. You are not losing yourself. You are remembering your true self. The you that you think of as Matthias is just one expression of an infinite being that has existed since before time began. The chamber around them began to dissolve, replaced by what Matthias could only describe as an ocean of liquid light. he found himself floating in this radiant medium, no longer possessing a physical body, but somehow still maintaining his individual awareness and identity.
Welcome to the realm between worlds. Lumiel's voice surrounded him like warm honey. From here, we can commune with any consciousness that vibrates at the frequency of love. Call to your sister with your heart, not your voice. Matthias reached out with what felt like tendrils of pure emotion, broadcasting the love he had always felt for Marguerite into the luminous void around them. For a moment, nothing happened. Then he felt a responding pulse of recognition, familiar, beloved, unmistakably her. She appeared not as the sick, dying child he had last seen, but as a being of radiant beauty, whose essence sparked with the same innocent joy that had characterized her brief earthly life. But now that joy was magnified into something cosmic in scope, as if she had been liberated into a state of existence where happiness was not just an emotion, but the very substance of reality. "Matthias!" Her voice carried the music of distant stars. "Oh, my beloved brother! How I have longed to let you know that I am more alive now than I ever was in that small, sick body." The reunion transcended anything Matthias had ever imagined possible. For what seemed like hours, he and Marguerite communed in the realm of pure spirit, sharing experiences and understanding with a depth and intimacy that physical communication could never achieve. She showed him glimpses of the dimensions where she now dwelled, realms of such beauty and complexity that human language could never adequately describe them. "There is no death, Matthias," she communicated directly into his consciousness. "There is only transformation from one state of being to another. And there is no separation except what we create through our own limited thinking. I have been with you in every moment of grief, in every prayer you offered for my peace. Love is the only reality that truly exists. Everything else is temporary illusion." She also confirmed everything that Lumiel had taught him about the nature of Jesus and his true message. "The one you call Christ exists at the center of this realm of light, beloved brother. He is not a distant judge, but a loving guide who helps all souls remember their divine nature. What the churches teach about him contains fragments of truth wrapped in layers of human misunderstanding. His actual presence is nothing like the fearsome deity they describe, but everything like the infinite love he tried to demonstrate while in physical form." As their communion began to fade, and Matthias felt himself being gently drawn back toward physical reality, Marguerite left him with a final message that would guide the rest of his life. "You have been chosen to preserve and share these truths, not because you are better than others, but because your heart has remained open to love despite all the pain you have experienced. Trust the being who has revealed these things to you. He serves the same light that I now dwell within. And remember always that every human soul you encounter carries the same divine spark that shines within us here. Treat them with the reverence you would show to God Himself, because that is exactly what they are." When Matthias opened his eyes back in the underground chamber, tears were streaming down his face, but they were tears of overwhelming gratitude rather than grief. Every doubt had been burned away by the reality of what he had experienced. He knew with absolute certainty that consciousness survived death,
that love was indeed the fundamental force of creation, and that Lumiel served the same source of divine truth that Jesus had embodied. "Now you understand," Lumiel communicated with profound gentleness, "why this knowledge has been preserved and passed down through hidden lineages for centuries. And now you understand why you have been prepared to become part of that lineage." Brother Matthias knelt before the being, not in worship, but in recognition of the sacred trust that was being placed in his hands. "What would you have me do, teacher?" "Live the truth you have received. Share it carefully with those whose hearts are open to receive it. And when the time comes for me to continue my journey among the stars, carry on the work of awakening that began the moment consciousness first recognized its own divine nature." The final 3 days of Lumiel's presence at St. Aldrich's transformed Brother Matthias from a questioning seeker into something far more significant, a living bridge between institutional Christianity and its mystical core. The being's vessel had nearly completed its self-repair process, and soon Lumiel would need to continue the cosmic mission that had brought him to Earth. But first, there were final lessons to be shared and preparations to be made. "The knowledge I have given you is not meant to be hoarded or used to elevate yourself above others. It is meant to be lived and shared in service to the awakening of all consciousness." "But how can I share such radical truths within a monastery? How can I teach what you've shown me without being branded a heretic?" "Truth finds a way, beloved friend. You will not need to preach revolutionary doctrine or challenge church authority directly. Instead, you will become a living example of what it means to embody divine love in every moment. Your fellow monks will see the transformation in you, the peace, the compassion, the quiet joy that comes from knowing your true nature. They will ask questions, and you will answer with the wisdom that has been awakened within you." Lumiel's guidance over those final days was intensely practical. The being taught Matthias how to maintain his connection to the higher dimensions of consciousness through meditation techniques that appeared, on the surface, to be perfectly orthodox Christian contemplative practices. He learned to recognize other souls who carried fragments of the ancient knowledge, hidden among merchants, craftsmen, and even occasional clergy who had inherited whispers of the original teachings. "You will know them by a certain light in their eyes, a depth to their questions about divine matters, a hunger that goes beyond what institutional religion offers. These are your true spiritual family, scattered across Christendom, but united by their shared recognition of humanity's divine heritage." Most importantly, Lumiel taught Matthias how to access what the being called the Christ consciousness, that state of awareness that Jesus had embodied and that remained available to all who opened their hearts to universal love. This is not about believing the right doctrines or performing the correct rituals. This is about aligning your individual will with the cosmic intelligence that creates and sustains all existence. When you operate from this alignment, healing happens naturally, wisdom flows freely, and even the most hardened hearts begin to soften in your presence. On the seventh night, as autumn stars wheeled overhead in the same patterns that had witnessed Lumiel's arrival, the being's vessel pulsed with renewed vitality. Its crystalline surfaces had regained their otherworldly luster, and the soft humming that emanated from its core indicated that interdimensional travel was once again possible. It is time, dear friend. My mission on your world extends far beyond our encounter. There are others who wait for the truths I carry. As they made their way through the dark forest to the original clearing, Matthias felt grief at the impending separation mixed with profound gratitude for the gift he had received. His entire understanding of reality had been fundamentally restructured, and he knew that the rest of his life would be devoted to integrating and sharing these revelations. At the vessel's entrance, Lumiel turned to face him one final time. In the starlight, the being's luminous form seemed to pulse with the very heartbeat of creation itself. Remember always that what you have learned is not new knowledge, but the remembrance of what your soul has always known. Trust this inner wisdom above all external authorities, and know that whenever you align with the frequency of unconditional love, you are in direct communion with the source that sent both Jesus and myself to serve the awakening of consciousness.
The being paused, and Matthias felt a final transmission of knowledge flowing directly into his awareness. Not words or concepts, but something deeper. It was as though Lumiel was downloading an entire library of cosmic wisdom into his consciousness, information that would unfold gradually over the years to come as he grew ready to receive it. You are no longer Brother Matthias, the questioning monk. You are Matthias, the awakened servant of truth. Carry this flame carefully, but do not hide it under the bushel of fear. The world needs what you now carry within you. As the vessel's door sealed and the craft began its silent ascent toward the stars, Matthias felt his heart breaking open with a love so vast it seemed to encompass the entire universe. He understood now that this was how Jesus must have felt, overwhelmed by compassion for a humanity that had forgotten its own divine nature, committed to service despite the dangers such commitment would inevitably bring. The months that followed Lumiel's departure marked the beginning of what would become Brother Matthias's legendary ministry, though the legends would never capture the full truth of their source. His transformation was immediately apparent to his fellow monks. The restless questioning that had previously marked his spiritual life was replaced by a deep serenity that seemed unshakable even in the face of suffering. When peasants came to the monastery seeking healing for their ailments, Matthias's touch became sought after for its seemingly miraculous effectiveness. He would place his hands on the sick and simply allow divine love to flow through him, often producing results that amazed even the most experienced physicians. More significantly, his scriptural interpretations during theological discussions began to reveal dimensions of meaning that his brothers had never considered. He had a way of reading familiar passages that suddenly illuminated their mystical significance, showing how Jesus' words contained layers of wisdom about the nature of consciousness and its relationship to divine reality. When the Master said,
"I am the way, the truth, and the life." He was not claiming exclusive access to God. He was demonstrating the state of consciousness that every soul must eventually achieve, complete alignment with divine will. He was the way because he showed us how to transcend ego consciousness. He was the truth because his very being expressed the eternal principles of love and unity. He was the life because through him we see what it means to live in full awareness of our immortal nature. Such interpretations skirted the edges of orthodox teaching, but never crossed into obvious heresy. The abbot, Dom Benedict, was a man of genuine spiritual depth who recognized that Matthias had achieved a level of mystical understanding that was rare even among the most dedicated contemplatives.
Within 5 years of Lumiel's visit, Brother Matthias had established what appeared to be a perfectly orthodox scriptorium school, but which actually functioned as a careful training ground for souls ready to receive deeper truths about the nature of Christian mysticism. Young monks who showed signs of spiritual hunger beyond conventional piety found themselves drawn to his instruction. He taught them to read the scriptures allegorically rather than literally, to see Jesus' parables as encoded teachings about consciousness and its potential for transformation. He showed them contemplative practices that appeared to be traditional Christian meditation, but which actually opened direct channels to the higher dimensions Lumiel had revealed. Most importantly, he taught them to recognize their own divine nature, not as blasphemous arrogance, but as the fundamental truth that Jesus had tried to awaken in all his followers. "We are not worms groveling for the mercy of a distant judge," he would tell his most advanced students during their private sessions. "We are sparks of the divine fire, temporarily expressing through human form. Our purpose is not to escape this world through death, but to transform it through the power of awakened love." By the time Brother Matthias reached his 50th year, his influence had spread far beyond St. Aldrich's walls. A network of quietly awakened souls had developed throughout the region. Craftsmen who saw their work as a form of prayer, merchants who conducted business with unprecedented honesty and compassion, nobles who began to question the justice of their inherited privileges. None of them would have been able to articulate exactly what had changed in their understanding of Christian teaching, but all of them carried within their hearts a deeper sense of connection to the divine presence that Jesus had embodied. They formed what modern observers might recognize as an early prototype of the mystical movements that would emerge centuries later. Christians who sought direct experience of God rather than mere intellectual belief in doctrines about God. The most significant aspect of Matthias's legacy, however, was the careful preservation of the knowledge Lumiel had entrusted to him. Using his position as keeper of the scriptorium, he began encoding the being's teachings within seemingly orthodox commentaries on scripture and saints' lives. Future scholars studying these manuscripts would find them filled with unusually sophisticated insights into the nature of consciousness, the cosmic dimensions of Christ's mission, and the ultimate destiny of human spiritual evolution. But the most sensitive material was preserved in an even more sophisticated way.
Matthias developed a network of successor guardians, individuals whose spiritual development had progressed to the point where they could safely carry fragments of the complete truth.
Like a cosmic library distributed across human consciousness, these awakened souls would preserve Lumiel's revelations through the dark centuries to come, waiting for a time when humanity would be ready to reclaim its awareness of its own divine heritage. When Brother Matthias finally laid down his physical body at the age of 73, he departed with the same serenity that had marked his life since Lumiel's visit. Those present at his deathbed reported that his final words were, "The light returns to light, and love continues its eternal service." But perhaps the most remarkable testimony to his transformation came from Dom Benedict, who had observed Matthias's spiritual journey for over 4 decades. In the chronicle he wrote documenting the monastery's history, the abbot made a cryptic entry that hinted at mysteries he could never fully understand. Brother Matthias lived among us as a man, but in truth he belonged to a realm of being that transcended ordinary human consciousness. In his presence, heaven and earth seemed to meet, and many of us glimpsed possibilities for Christian life that our theology struggles to explain. Whatever divine visitation marked his middle years transformed him into something our age has few words to describe, a bridge between the world we know and the kingdom that Jesus promised would come to pass. The network of awakened souls that Matthias had carefully cultivated continued to grow and spread throughout the medieval world. They operated in perfect secrecy, appearing to be conventional Christians while quietly nurturing the mystical understanding that would eventually give birth to movements ranging from the Franciscan and Dominican mystics to the later Protestant emphasis on direct personal relationship with Christ. All of them, whether they fully understood it or not, carried forward the same essential message that Lumiel had brought from the stars: that human beings are not fallen creatures desperately in need of salvation, but expressions of divine consciousness temporarily experiencing separation in order to rediscover unity through the transformative power of unconditional love. As we reach the end of Brother Matthias's extraordinary story, we find ourselves confronting the same fundamental questions that challenged him in that underground chamber nearly 9 centuries ago. The doubt he experienced, the courage he needed to embrace a truth that challenged everything he had been taught, the ultimate transformation that came from aligning with cosmic love. These are not merely historical curiosities. They are the eternal human journey from unconsciousness to awakening, from separation to unity, from fear to love.
The questions that Matthias faced are the same questions we face today in our modern world. Are we content to accept received wisdom without questioning its deeper implications? Do we have the courage to seek direct experience of the divine rather than settling for second-hand reports? Can we open our hearts to possibilities that might challenge our most fundamental beliefs about the nature of reality and our place within it? Throughout human history, beings like Lumiel have appeared at crucial moments to remind us of truth that we are perpetually in danger of forgetting. They come not to establish new religions or create more divisions between people, but to awaken us to the cosmic perspective that transcends all human-made boundaries. They remind us that consciousness is not confined to individual brains, that love is not merely an emotion, but a fundamental force of creation, and that the divine nature Jesus embodied is the same divine nature that exists within every human soul. The knowledge that Lumiel shared with Brother Matthias was never meant to be the exclusive possession of a few initiates. It was meant to spread quietly through humanity's collective consciousness, preparing us for the inevitable time when we would be ready to reclaim our cosmic heritage and take our place among the awakened civilizations of the universe. Perhaps that time is now. Perhaps the spiritual hunger that so many people feel in our current age, the growing dissatisfaction with purely materialistic explanations of existence, the increasing recognition that consciousness is more fundamental than matter. Perhaps these are all signs that humanity is ready for the next phase of its spiritual evolution. The divine power of love and healing that Jesus demonstrated 2,000 years ago was never meant to be a distant miracle that we could only wonder at from afar. It was meant to be a preview of the potential that lies dormant within every human heart, waiting for the moment when we have the courage to believe in our own divine nature. What do you believe? As you've listened to Brother Matthias's story, have you felt resonance with truths that your soul has always known but perhaps never had permission to acknowledge? Have you experienced moments in your own life when the boundaries between the physical and spiritual worlds seemed to dissolve? When love felt like more than just an emotion? When prayer seemed to access something far greater than you had ever imagined possible? These experiences are not anomalies or wishful thinking. They are glimpses of the reality that beings like Lumiel have always sought to help us remember. The reality that we are not separate from the divine source of creation, but expressions of it, temporarily exploring the dimensions of space and time in order to eventually return home with the treasures of wisdom and compassion that can only be gained through the journey of apparent separation.
The institutional structures of religion will always be with us, and they serve important purposes in providing community, moral guidance, and historical continuity. But the true spiritual revolution that Jesus initiated, and that beings like Lumiel continue to support, is not about changing external institutions. It's about awakening the divine potential within individual consciousness. Every time someone chooses love over fear, unity over separation, service over self-interest, they are participating in the same cosmic work that Jesus embodied and that Brother Matthias devoted his life to supporting. Every act of genuine compassion, every moment of selfless service, every choice to see the divine spark within another human being, these are the real miracles that transform worlds. If this story has resonated with something deep within your heart, I encourage you to share it with others who might be ready to question the conventional limits of what it means to be human and what it means to be spiritual. Share it with those who hunger for a more direct connection to the divine presence that pervades all existence. Share it with anyone who has ever wondered whether there might be more to reality than what our modern materialistic culture teaches us to believe. And most importantly, don't just consume this story as entertainment. Let it be a catalyst for your own spiritual journey. Begin to explore the contemplative practices that can open your awareness to the higher dimensions of consciousness that Brother Matthias learned to access. Start to live as though every person you encounter carries within them the same divine spark that shines at the heart of creation. Choose love over fear in the 1,000 small decisions that make up your daily life. Subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell so you won't miss the other stories of hidden history, suppressed knowledge, and the eternal human quest to remember our true nature. In our next episode,
we'll explore another encounter between human consciousness and the cosmic intelligences that guide our species' spiritual evolution. A meeting that took place in the courts of Renaissance Italy and forever changed our understanding of art, beauty, and the divine proportion that underlies all creation. But for now, take time to sit with the questions that Brother Matthias's story has awakened within you. The same cosmic intelligence that guided his transformation is available to guide yours. The same love that Lumiel embodied is the love that beats within your own heart. And the same divine potential that Jesus demonstrated is the potential that waits within your own consciousness, ready to awaken the moment you have the courage to believe in your own sacred nature. The stars that witnessed Lumiel's departure from Earth still shine in our night sky, and they carry with them the promise that we are not alone in this vast universe. Consciousness is awakening throughout the cosmos, and we are all part of that great awakening. The question is not whether we are ready to remember our divine heritage. The question is whether we have the courage to live as though we already have.